WebEx
be a good
Assistant
and
is
impactful
enabled to
study
save audio
if you look
highlights.
at our own border region. And today also I will talk about, this is over a one-year project. I will talk about the lessons we learned from this one-year study. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here is the outline of today's presentation. I will start with the study objective and our study timeline. And I will give some background information as well as the border mobility statistics. And I will finalize with findings, lessons learned, and I will finally talk about what we are doing as a follow-up in our research. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this study had 3 phases and it had 3 main objectives. The first one was to develop a data-driven understanding of the relationship between cross-border transportation and speed of spread in US-Mexico border regions. So this was our first phase main objective, and then we expand this to our other phases. The second objective, also the main goal of the second phase, was to explore the potential impacts of different contact tracing strategies in our region. And the final phase also has its own objective, which was to analyze the effect of COVID-19 border restrictions and binational vaccination efforts in the El Paso region. Next slide, please. So here is the study timeline. As I mentioned, it's covered more than a year. And we started phase 1, which titled as Cross-Border Transportation as a Disease Vector in COVID-19. We developed an econometric model to try to understand the significant parameters who may increase the speed of spread. And it started just after the pandemic hit. We started in May 2020, and we ended that phase 1 in September 2020. And as Mr. Calvo mentioned, I presented our phase 1 findings in this meeting back in December 2020. And then we follow up our study when the contact tracing was kind of a hot topic, and we developed our own epidemiological model, which is called SIR model, to simulate different potential contact tracing practices. And that ended in February 2021. And then we, with the introduction of the vaccines on both sides of the border, we updated our epidemiological model and introduced the vaccination efforts. And that was the main study of the phase 3, and it was called Border Mobility and Vaccination During a Pandemic, and it ended in June 2021. So I will go over them one by one. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is the background. As you all know that, similar to other infectious disease, transportation is considered as a vector for spreading COVID-19. And although early disease cases are in the region are mainly related to air transit or people are coming outside the region, the upcoming or subsequent community spread is impacted a variety of factors. And that's what we try to look at, what are those factors were. And during our background search or literature search, we have seen there are tons of research in transportation and COVID-19 with different focus, but the cross-border mobility and transportation, their effect in disease spread, especially focusing on the binational border communities, was not widely understood, or there are very few research on that, so that's why we picked this topic. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I want to show the number of cases, unfortunately deaths, and the border crossing trends with COVID-19. So on the left-hand side, you see the number of cases and deaths so in the world, and these numbers are from last week. So we had more than 400 million cases with nearly 6 million deaths. And in the United States, unfortunately, we are leading with over 77 million cases and nearly 1 million deaths. So for our county, in El Paso County, we had 2,300,000 cases with 3,200 deaths. And on the south of the border, there were, in Ciudad Juarez, there were 38,000 cases with 4,300 deaths. On the other side of the slide, the right-hand side, you can see the border crossing mobility trends since 2000s. And I would say that with COVID-19 was one of the most impactful events occurred that affect the border crossings, both northbound and southbound. Next slide, please.
The next slide.
So here is another chart that also demonstrates the border mobility, and it shows the average number of people crossing northbound, and we use the Bureau of Transportation Statistics as our source. And as you see on the left-hand side, before the restrictions or pandemic or lockdown, school and business closures, it used to be around 80,000 crossings per day. But when it hit with late March or early April, that number went down to 20,000 people per day. So we have seen some recovery. And as you see that with the COVID-19 related border restrictions lifted early November, and we saw a jump in November, but this might be an impact of the holiday session as well. So we are still tracking the numbers, and I can also tell that we are still a bit far from our pre-pandemic days regarding the border mobility. Next slide, please. This is another data source that we use to show the trips in the El Paso County. And we got from this information from a third-party vendor, which is called SafeGraph. And they provide trips data to points of interest in a selected region. So, and sorry for the first vertical line, it should be starting a little left. So there was a kind of tilted. And as you see that with border restrictions, again, there was a huge drop, and we are still recovering, but it looks like it is better than the border mobility, and it looks like we reach our pre-pandemic days, but again, this might be because of the holiday session, and we still are tracking the numbers. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the findings, and I can talk phase by phase. So in the phase one, as I mentioned, we developed an econometric model to identify parameters that drove higher rates of COVID-19 spread in United States and Mexican border and non-border communities. So we found that binational border communities were more likely to have a higher COVID-19 spread rate than non-border peer communities. And also, there were border mobility restrictions highly implemented. The border communities has doubled the average of number of cases per 1,000 population in the border communities compared to non-border communities. And we have seen also the implementation of the policies to slow down the speed of COVID-19 spread was significantly different on each side of the border. And also we can suggest that the higher COVID-19 spread in the border communities could be tied to the mismatch between the spread control policies implemented on each side of the border. Next slide, please. In the second phase, where we looked at the effect of border travel restrictions on cross-border mobility in our region, and as I mentioned earlier, we simulated some scenarios with various contact tracing efforts. And we found that the existing contact tracing practices like polling people in El Paso were limited because they relied on the memory of the infected person. They are calling, they are asking, and they are trying to track all the close contacts. So on those days, the topic, the contact tracing with the passive ways of data collection was quite interesting. And we developed our scenarios to show the passive contact tracing efforts, or in other words, apps or other technology use for the entire community, while maintaining the traditional tracing practice could reduce the number of cases, and that's around 20%. And another thing we also looked at, just enhancing or implementing contact tracing programs who are crossing the border, or the individuals who cross the border, was not significant to reduce the speed of spread. So if there was a contact tracing implementation, it should be for the whole region. Next slide, please. In the last phase, where we analyzed the daily infection and vaccination rates on both sides of the border, also we looked at the number of daily trips made in the El Paso County. So what we found that as long as a significant share of the population remains unvaccinated, the number of increase in the commutes within the county and across the border would result in increased infections, hospitalizations, and unfortunately deaths. So our simulation, the updated simulation results, and we did that simulation just before Delta and Omicron variants were in place, show that increasing the fully vaccinated population in El Paso to 85% to 90% would save 32 or 58 lives a year. Also, findings suggest that more uniform vaccine deployment across both sides of the border could not only save lives, but allow an earlier return on pre-pandemic internal and cross-border mobility patterns. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I will talk about our major takeaways or the lessons we learned for this whole study. So we have two. The first one is, as we were expecting, the domestic and cross-border mobility both are significant for disease spread in the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second one is coordinating disease control policies on both sides of the border is very critical to mitigate the effects of a pandemic in border communities and to accelerate the eventual return to normal domestic and cross-border mobility. Next slide, please. So when we try to find different mobility data for the El Paso County, we found different potential data sources, and we came up with this ongoing project, which is titled as Emerging Data Sources in Cross-Border Transportation that can be used for any research idea. And our goal is to explore the potential of emerging data sources in responding to various questions related to cross-border trips and travel patterns. And what we are looking for is both the INRIX and the SafeGraph data. They have their own subdivided data sets called trips, trajectories, patterns, and places. And we are looking for potential applications or practices like origin-destination studies, travel pattern analysis, trip or parking generation studies, and etc. Can we go to the next slide, please? And this ends my today's presentation. And you can find the reports for each phase that I explained today in this slide just below. And if you have any questions or comments, I would like to take it right. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I can make a comment about, we've been really trying to get people to understand what we need. And the idea of doing cross-border vaccinations, we've been fighting that for a long time. We actually did the 33,000 there at the Tornillo Bridge, and we have another one coming up for about 150,000 children for all the state of Chihuahua. The problem is that, just the resources that are required, it's a big expense for them. They've always paid. We've provided the vaccines, and they paid for it. Last time it was 500,000. This time it's going to be $1 million to be able to twice, 2 vaccines for children between the ages of 5 to 11 and then 12 to 17. And then the logistics is amazing, because now we have children that need to be with a parent. We're trying to figure that one out. And then the doses are different between the 5 and 11 and the 12 and 17. So it's unfortunate that that's put on a local level kind of pressure, like it had to come from us to do something as incredible as that. And that was a big, big project that was done locally with really no support from or understanding from state or federal. So I just want to make that point that this has been maybe 4 or 5 months ago, or maybe more, of us knowing that that's the best way to do it. Now, just one caveat is that the people from Mexico trust us tremendously, and so when we do it there at the border, they have a sense of trust that everything's going to be done properly. The mayor and I got to meet the ambassador of the U.S. to Mexico, Ken Salazar, and there was a lady there that from the Tarumadas that was the first lady that got the injection, and she said there's no way they would have gotten that injection if it hadn't been for the U.S. providing it because of the discrimination. So we can offer so much opportunities, but we need that support and that backing.
Thank you, sir. And I think with your efforts, that would end better than it should have been. So I think you saved most probably a lot of lives with these efforts. So my study was, for that part, was back where the vaccination rates in Mexico was around 10%. So maybe that is showing your efforts are very vital for the both communities. And thank you. Yes, sir.
I saw on your graph there, you showed that in Juarez population, of 1.5 plus million, that only 38,000 coronaviruses, 4,300 people had lost their lives. That's cannot be an accurate number. I mean, we're looking at a population here of quite a bit less, and you showed on your graph 230,000 and 3,200 lives lost. And that's pretty accurate. So it's hard to gauge and hard to border crossing and kind of work together when their accounting or their tracking mechanism seems to be totally and completely inaccurate.
Well, the problem was, Mayor, that the practicality was that nobody was getting tested. There was very few tests, and so a lot of people had the virus but didn't know about it.
That's what I'm saying, but it's very inaccurate.
People died, yeah.
You know, 38,000 with a population of 1.5 million.
You're right, sir, and that's what we get from government of Mexico
I know
data
that.
set.
I've seen those numbers.
And that's also one challenge that we face during the data collection, because the data on both sides are not consistent. We have a really good data on north, but it is really hard to have a consistent data from the south. So thank you, sir. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I talked to them when we were there on Wednesday, no, on Tuesday, and they said that fully vaccinated in Juarez today, they're running, and it's not the one shot, the two shots already, they're running at 92% fully vaccinated in the whole country. Now, they're counting from age 14 and up, where we're counting from age 5 and up, so that's a very different number, and that's why the other number really didn't make a lot of sense to me. So that was the number that they gave us on Tuesday.
Thanks, sir.
So, noting what the mayor was just saying and understanding the issues with the data, would that have changed anything in terms of the findings of your study here?
So for the last phase, we looked at people who are vaccinated on south of border and number of people who are crossing. And there were some assumptions that we think that they have the same sample of the people who are vaccinated crossing the border. And also, we are kind of maybe a bit over-predicting because we are just relying on the data which we have. So the number of cases, we deduct the number of cases and assume that the rest of the population are prone to be sick. So that may increase our findings a bit more conservative. If we have the actual data, we may end up with lower numbers. Thanks. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on now to our second presentation. If we can put it up on the screen. So while we get it up here, Brittany, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us all the great work that you're doing.
Hi, everyone. Well, okay, it's up now. Hi, everyone. I am Brittany Gick. I am an associate transportation researcher at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute in Bryan College Station. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is the cross-border impacts of COVID on freight. And this work, we did a project for TxDOT looking specifically at the impacts of COVID. This presentation is not going to be a reflection of that work. I'm going to talk more about the national data that is available for freight, cross-border freight, and as well as specifically for the El Paso region. So I've pulled data for the El Paso, Texas port, the Isleta port, and Santa Teresa, New Mexico port. So those are going to be the ones we're talking about today. And all of this data has been pulled within the last 3 weeks. So it's all the most recent available data from when I made the presentation. In some slides you're going to see later, there wasn't data available for December 2021. It just came out, but it wasn't available by the time I made this presentation. So it's not included in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Brittany, so when you give us this information, this is prior to the federal guidelines changing? Or do you have the impact that the federal guidelines changing made based on trucking across the country and cross-border? Do you have that information to share?
So I will be talking about data specifically in 2020 and 2021, and in some cases looking at 2020 or 2019 and 2018, just to see the changes in the levels. So you'll see that in a few slides.
You won't see the impact it made on the federal changes.
No, not specifically. I didn't address anything related to specific guideline changes.
I'd love, and I don't know if you could get that for us, because that'd be really something interesting to be able to gauge to see what the difference made when the proof of vaccination changed and
Certainly, and I can incorporate that on a future presentation, maybe.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so in this slide, this is national U.S., Mexico and Canada borders, for instance, on one, and then just looking at Mexico cross-border changes by truck, and then total by truck. Truck is the predominant mode that freight is moved by. So I'll be talking about trucks specifically, but also total numbers. So these just show how much money, how the value of freight moved across borders. And you'll see the drop in numbers in 2020. And then 2021 numbers will not be out until March 2022. Those are national total numbers. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, this just highlights these numbers. Again, 2020 by month, and then we show the change from 2019. So you'll see in April and May how impactful COVID was on the value of freight shipped across U.S.-Mexico borders. So there was a 46% decrease in April and a 53% decrease in May. But as you can see with the 2021 numbers, that there has been an increase. So things have improved in cross-border freight between the U.S. and Mexico. And specifically, I wanted to point out in April and May, you can see for the change from 2020 at the bottom, you'll see that's a 93% increase from April the year before. And in May, it was a 113% increase from 2020. So we can see that things are improving month over month from 2020. Next slide, please. This graph, again, just shows those numbers in a more visual format, so you can see that the severe impact that COVID had in that bottom line, which is 2020. This one also includes the 2018 and 2019 data as well. So 2021 is the top line. That's the gray one at the top. So we can see that U.S. freight value moving across Mexico borders is rebounding, which is good to see. Next slide, please. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the number of trucks that are crossing the border. So this figure shows the number of truck crossings. So again, you can see the impact from COVID in April and May of 2020, and then how things have improved in that top line as well. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk national numbers by truck specifically. So again, we can see the decrease in April and May of 2020, with about a 42 to 49% decrease in those months. But again, it's improved in 2020. You can see everything has increased in 2020. So that's good. Or 2021, sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, this is just a visualization of that trade by truck for 2020 and 21. And again, this shows that the data for December was not yet available, but again, we are above where 2020 numbers were, so that's, again, great to see. This is still the national data. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to get into the regional ports specifically, and I realized this morning that my total numbers are not accurate. There was an issue when I put the numbers in, so let's disregard those numbers, and I'll show them a little bit later in a different format. But this table points out exports and imports specifically, so we can look at those numbers and the change from 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So we see that the value of imports and exports have increased from 2020, and then we can also see the impacts in 2020 from COVID, so the decrease in the value of imports and exports. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this table shows for 2020 specifically the monthly breakdown for total, and these numbers are correct, and then total by truck specifically. And so we can see the devastating impacts in April and May from COVID. Sorry. And we can go to the next slide, please. Now this slide shows 2021 numbers, the same information for 2021, and it shows the change from 2020. So we are seeing increases. As you'll see, a negative number for January and February. That's not reflective of the COVID impact, so that's a different issue. But again, April and May increases of 58% in the value by truck, 98% increase in May for total 109% increase in May. So really great things are happening in your regional ports here. Next slide, please. Again, this just graphically shows the value of all freight for your regional ports by month. So you can see the impacts there. And next slide, please. And this figure shows the value of freight between the regional ports by truck specifically. Again, you can clearly see the impact of COVID. And again, that top line, that gray line, is how things have improved. Next slide, please. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, moving my notes here. Okay, so this figure highlights the monthly value of freight passing between the El Paso regional ports. In the line, you will see that's the truck specific value. So again, I wanted to highlight that the truck is the predominant mode moving freight in your area, and we can just see the monthly changes. So the yellow bar is for 2019, the teal in the middle is 2020, and then the gray is 2021 data. So you can just clearly see how things have changed and are improving. Next slide, please.
No, I think
All right, next I wanted to talk a little bit about commodity-specific data. So nationally, some of like the big commodities are computers and parts, electrical machinery, and motor vehicles and parts. Those are big national commodities, and they're also major commodities moved in your region as well. But nationally, we can see that in 2019, there was $156 billion worth of freight for computers and parts moved across the country by truck. And then in 2020, it dropped to $136 billion. So we can see the national number impact that COVID had on those numbers for just commodity data. Next slide, please. Okay, and this table just shows the numbers for the commodity-specific data. So the one thing to think about when you're talking about commodity data, for the national numbers, they mentioned computers and parts and motor vehicles and parts. When looking at the data that I pulled from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, they use the harmonized system data at the 2-digit level. So there is these numbers aren't just for computers and parts, it's everything in that commodity. So it's important to kind of understand that includes more than just computers and parts, but this is the best that we could do with that data. So
all these numbers that we're looking at from 2018 to 2021, is that current value of parts? Is it taken in, like inflation taken into account? Because obviously 2021 is coming in, compared to 19 and 18 as higher.
yes.
But is that reflective at all when you're looking at values at all because of inflation?
So the numbers that come from the transborder statistics from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics they are not seasonally adjusted, and it does not take into account inflation. So there is an issue of kind of comparing them, but this is the best we can do with the data that we have available right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next slide, please. Again, this is just another representation of these different commodities for 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 for your regional ports. So the green bar is computer-related. Oh, and this is a breakdown by exports and imports. So you'll see they're right next to the exports and imports are right next to each other, but green is computer, green and yellow are computer, I'm sorry. The teal and gray are electrical, and then the maroon and the other green are motor vehicles. Okay, next slide. So throughout the pandemic in 2020, COVID-19 had many economic impacts on border communities, and this is consisting of lower toll revenues. People were spending less on materials. They weren't going out shopping as much for things they didn't need, maybe saving money in case there was any issues, and then there were a lot of factory closures. There was recovery during the pandemic specifically. We saw that in some of the later months, but during the COVID time, it was a lot of speculative data because there were still a lot of unknowns and not everything was clear at the time. However, during COVID, I think a lot of people really started to understand the importance of freight. We all have probably struggled to get toilet paper there in March, April, May, and there was a lot of importance put on truck drivers specifically, and they were working throughout the pandemic. So I think a lot more people saw the importance of freight. And I think we learned that freight is going to continue to look different, and there is going to be more of an importance put on the value of freight and things moving and getting where they need to go. Next slide, please. So, since the pandemic, so we're looking at more 2021 numbers here, and this is from the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas. In employment for the El Paso area increased by 6.7% from July 2020 to July 2021. There's been growth in the government sector, leisure and hospitality, trade, transportation, and utility. There was a loss in the manufacturing and professional and business service industries, but not severe. So currently consumer spending is above pre-pandemic spending, but there is a trend downward now. So they ramped up on spending, but we're starting to go back down a little bit. Mexico's industrial production index fell from 98.3 in May 2021 to 97.8 in June 2021. But that was 13.6% higher than the same time in 2020. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, the impacts of freight and supply chain challenges are continuing to be felt by everyone across the country. We've all heard the stories about, the port issues in California and people not getting all of their goods as quickly as maybe they had wanted or would have liked. That's going to continue to look different and have impacts across the country. There's going to continue to be supply chain challenges across the country for everyone, and there's a bit of a ripple effect, and as we have issues in California, that's going to impact things getting to people in timely manner. There is recovery we've seen in most of these figures. It is ongoing, and not all industries have recovered in the same ways, as we saw a little bit in that commodity-specific data. Some have had greater recovery, and some others have not seen as quite the level that others have. So that's important to understand. Next slide, please. Okay, that is all I have for kind of reviewing this freight-specific data. Any questions? Yeah.
One of the things when you were talking about ports and transportation, one of the things we've noticed in the automobile industry, can't get the ships unloaded. And that's become a big impact and a big problem for us. And then we finally do get them unloaded, then we don't have drivers or we don't have trucks. And it's created months of backlog, as you can see, not just here in El Paso, but nationwide. There is no inventory, and yet there's a chip shortage, but it's also stuck on ships or stuck in ports, and they're not being moved across the country.
Exactly, yeah, and the data here that I've talked about obviously doesn't cover like the truck driver shortage and the shortage of labor within ports. So there is definitely impacts from those things as well. A lot of people have just chosen not to go back to work, and it is a severe impact for getting things moving. It's definitely a major impact. So anything else? All right, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Brittany and Okan, for the presentation. So with that, unless there are any more questions, let me just say something related to this last presentation. I think it's very important for us to continue stressing, as we recover from the pandemic. But it's very important for us to continue, showing the importance of our region compared to the other border regions as well. And this is timely because of the Border Trade Advisory Committee that is restarting meetings. We have a meeting next week. Commissioner Holguin, Rafa Aldrete from GTI, David Coronado from the city of El Paso, and John Varela from the Borderplex Alliance, and myself. We're the members of this Border Trade Advisory Committee meeting representing El Paso. And again, it's very important to show, following what Brittany mentioned, how important the supply chains that we are part of, they are tremendously important for the industry in general, for the country. We're talking about high value supply chains, automotive, medical equipment, electronics, etc. So I think it's very timely for that presentation, and we're we'll continue to talk to you about what BTAC, is looking at. So with that, Chair, I think we're on track for, we can have maybe like a 5-7 minute break.
We're still trying to get to quorum, so.
Yeah,
Short.
we're a little bit short in quorum, but if we can take a break and come back at 9:30.
1, 2, 3, 7,
You only count as one, Walter.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Chair Walter Miller. Vice Chair Ricardo Samaniego. Mayor Antonio Araujo. Senator Cesar Blanco. Representative Rudy Cruz. Senator Joseph Fernandez. Alderman Dino Coronado. Trent Doolittle. Representative Art Fierro. Representative Mary Gonzalez. City Manager Tommy Gonzalez.
Here.
I'm online.
Here.
This is Mary Gonzalez.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. All right, Representative Cassandra Hernandez. Yvette Hernandez. Commissioner Holguin. Mayor Oscar Leeser.
Present.
Mayor Manuel Leos. Representative Cici Lizárraga.
Present, good morning.
Representative Willie Madrid. All right, Representative Joe Moody. Representative Claudia Ordaz Perez. Representative Lina Ortega.
Here.
Norma Palacios. Mayor Javier Perea.
Present.
Representative Henry Rivera. Sam Rodriguez. Mayor Benjamin Romero. Commissioner Manuel Sanchez.
Present.
Ellen Smythe. Tomas Treviño.
Here.
And Mayor Diana Trujillo.
Present.
Thank you. So we do have one.
We do have a quorum present in the room, so we can go to our public comment period. Is anyone signed up for public comment?
For later items, yes, not now.
Not for this item. Okay, would anyone like to address public comment in this period? Okay, at this time, I'd like to recognize, Joe Beatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, if you would just indulge me, I think it's always worth noting when we have an El Paso and one of our own here on this board accomplish great things. So I want to recognize that our immediate past chair and Representative Lino Ortega yesterday was inducted as a Texas legal legend after her career is not over. That's not what that means. It means that this is the State Bar of Texas recognizing her. So this isn't a community thing. This is someone that has made sure that the courthouse doors stay open for people that are harmed in our community and across the state. So it speaks volumes about the work that she's done for folks. And the way that they use the words they use to talk about legal legends, they said these are folks who have spent their professional careers serving others and taking on challenges that are much bigger than themselves. And that speaks volumes about Representative Ortega. So I want to congratulate her and bring that to your attention.
Okay. Thank you, panel, for those remarks. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so then let's move on to the discussion and action items. Item 1 is to approve the minutes of the January 21, 2022 El Paso EPMPO TPB meeting.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Is there discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? With no opposition, the motion carries.
All right, item 2 is to amend the amended Destino 2045 MTP and Destino 2021-2024 TIP to program additional $10 million from Rider 11B funds, category 11, to the Loop 375 widening project from Spur 601 to US 62-180, Loop 1. With that, I think Mr. Trevino will.
This increase is needed due to the escalation in prices we've seen recently. The original estimate was 54 million, and we're at 95% plan development, and the latest estimate has us at around 64 million. So.
Okay. Much older there. Is anyone signed up for this item? Okay. Any discussion on this item?
I have a question, I'm sorry. The reprogramming, the 10 million, was that already programmed for another project, or those have already been?
No, that hadn't been identified yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you run through the cost again and what
The original estimate was 54 million, and now that we're 95% complete and using the latest market cost for some of the items, it's been adjusted to 64 million. And the project lets in May, so we're pretty close to letting.
Okay, thank you.
And also, if I may, this project was scheduled for letting originally in 2019. And so, we have almost 3 years of escalation of inflation. This is the one that had an issue with a utility that was, delayed, unfortunately, but it's ready to go now. It's a really good project.
Further discussion, is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries.
All right, so item number 3 is to approve the El Paso EPMPO office space lease agreement. On this, Mr. Chair, we are not ready. We were hoping to have the final or the draft final lease agreement for the MPO office space. Unfortunately, we did not get it. So we would like to postpone this item for next month. What I can do is give the board the sort of like the broad elements of the negotiation for what we're looking at. If you recall, we've been looking for office space, different alternatives. We're looking at the potentially moving to a different location, different building. But really, because a lot of it has to do with COVID and the the length of the time that it would take to prepare any different office space for our needs and all that. So that would take us beyond the expiration of our lease. So what we're doing now is negotiating with the current landlord, the current office space, a short-term lease, which is 24 months. And I think we have in one of the, or can you scroll down? I think we have the basics. There we go. Yeah, so we're negotiating a 24-month lease. New rent of $19.55 compared to the $16 and change that we're currently paying. The space is for MPO offices only for the second floor. The boardroom, we're not going to renew that, and I know many of you are going to be missing that column in the middle, right? And you know, we're not going to do any improvements to the office, given that it's a relatively short-term lease. Now, this is a good deal because it gives us time to continue looking for different buildings, different opportunities, and now that we really understand the very long lead times to do any additional renovations or adjustments to offices, you know, I think it's a good thing. So I don't foresee any issues with in negotiating the lease under these terms. It's just a matter of getting the paperwork. We have a draft agreement that is being reviewed by legal, but unfortunately we don't have the final draft here to present. Given that the current lease expires on May the 1st, we still have the month of March and April to execute. So, you know, I think we're in good shape. So we will bring it to you all next month.
We need a motion to postpone for the next meeting.
We need a motion to postpone until the next.
So moved.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. All right, item 4 is to approve legal services agreement with Kemp Smith LLP.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to recuse myself as legal counsel for the MPO for this particular item. I'm available to answer any factual questions that might come up, but I won't be providing any legal advice on agenda item number 4.
Right. Chair, I don't know if it's the right time, but I'll abstain. My daughter's attorney with Kemp Smith.
Sure.
Okay. By their office phone, so.
I like Kemp Smith a lot, so do I have to?
All right, so a little bit of background here. So what we're looking at is exercising the second 1-year extension of the current contract that the MPO has with the Kemp Smith. So it's a total for 4 years. So the action would be to extend it for 1 more year. The other part of the action is to increase the maximum amount that we currently have at $35,000. And can you put the second or the attachment or the, there we go. Right. So here's a little bit of the history. Currently, the maximum, the ceiling is at $35,000 per year. And you see the history of how that has been moving under the current contract. So when we took this to the executive committee a week ago, we as MPO staff, we were proposing increasing the ceiling to $40,000. Again, you know, we are very close, and you know, we don't want to be, you know, as a matter of a couple $1,000s to be restricting, you know, the use of legal counsel. And you know, I'll speak for myself. I'm very, very happy with the services, the quality of the service, and the readiness and timeliness of Sergio specifically. So when we brought it up to the executive committee, there was some discussion there. And Mr. Chair, if you want to, you know, address that.
We did discuss this, and the consensus was, and the recommendation is to the policy board is to, because it is a cap, to raise it where we will not have to come back to you again. We have 1 more year, one more extension on this contract, and then we will have to renegotiate. And so we thought that this was an appropriate amount. There are a couple of items that are coming up, one of them being the lease agreement that we have to renegotiate, that we wanted to have adequate budget to be able to address those issues. So we recommended instead of the $40,000 to go to the $50,000. It doesn't mean we have to use it, but it will be there and we won't have to come back to you again. So that was the thoughts of the executive committee.
And one more thing, the rates are not increasing, so the rates, the hourly rates remain the same, so it's just extending the number of hours that we have available. And again, it's a maximum, doesn't mean that we have to spend it. But with the work that we're foreseeing in the next year, I think it's, we took that recommendation from the executive committee, and as staff, we totally agree.
And the other comment that we actually, the discussion that we had was that the budget, we have the budget to be able to actually increase it to 50,000. With that in mind, I move that we approve this agreement at increasing the amount to 50,000.
Excuse me, I had a question. This is Sissy Isaraga. Can you see my hand raised? So, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask my question? Oh, yeah. No, I know, Eduardo, you mentioned that there's not an increase in the hourly rates. Is that correct? So I think from 2019, we've seen like a 70% increase. So I'm just kind of curious about this.
Yeah, I mean, what has increased is the ceiling. We have never reached the ceiling, the maximum. But, we are very, very close. And this year, it's no exception. We're very close to the current ceiling, which is 35. So the reason why we came back and asking to increase the ceiling initially to 40 was that, we do foresee a lot more activity because there are a lot more agreements. And as you will see in item number 5, there's a lot of help that we're going to need, or legal services that we're going to need to guide the MPO with negotiating some agreements this year. So yes, you're right. The ceiling has increased, and I don't believe that the rates have increased.
I don't believe the hourly rate has increased for
From
the
the
duration of
beginning.
the contract.
Right. I don't remember
But
that.
you just want the ceiling to be increased.
Exactly right. That gives us more available hours for this coming year. And then again, because this is the last extension of the current contract, when this expires, well, before it expires, we will definitely, proceed in getting another contract, whether it's, with Kemp Smith or somebody else. We will do that appropriately when the time comes.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion? I have a second also. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed? With no opposition, the motion carries.
All right, so item number 5 is to give notice to the city of El Paso MPO intent to review and make changes to operational agreement between El Paso MPO and the city of El Paso. So a little background on that. So the MPO has several agreements that really dictate what the MPO does, with roles and responsibilities. There is one which is a 3-party agreement between TxDOT, the MPO, and the city of El Paso. And then there's a second one that the MPO has with New Mexico DOT as well. And then the third agreement is an operational agreement between the MPO and the city of El Paso that really goes into more details about the responsibilities of the city as the fiscal agent. The current agreement was originally signed in 2014, and the agreement states that unless there's an intent or an interest to modify it, it is extended for 1 year. I believe it's May the 1st, the magic date, right? And the agreement states that if there is any interest in making revisions, notice has to be sent to the other party. And I'm looking at Sergio to make sure that I'm...
That's correct, yes, sir.
You can talk now.
Oh, absolutely. So this is, like Eduardo was saying, there's an operational policy agreement between the MPO and the city of El Paso outlining the duties and responsibilities of the city as the fiscal agent and also of the MPO. That agreement was entered into back in May 1st of 2014. And as Eduardo mentioned, it renews automatically every year on that date, unless notice is given by either one of the parties that it intends or would like to make changes or revisions to the agreement. Now, I want to make clear that the automatic renewal occurs. I think it was a clause that was put in there as a matter of convenience. Hey, if everything's fine and no questions are raised, let's not bother coming back and renewing it. And immediately after that clause, it says, however, the parties can revisit this agreement at any time if necessary to make changes or revisions. And then it says the city must give notice within 30 days. I think that's a typo in the agreement. I think clearly the intent was either party would have to give notice within 30 days. So this agreement will renew automatically regardless on May 1st of this coming year. But what the executive committee has recommended is that the MPO authorize the executive director to provide the city with notice, the 30-day notice of its intent to review. And I would change the word make to propose changes to the operational policy agreement. Now, from a legal perspective, I will tell you that I think it's about time to go back and look at the agreement just as a matter of course and best practice. It's been a while since it's been looked at. There's been a few questions that have come up in recent MPO activities and business that have kind of required us to go back and look at this agreement and also kind of define the city's role as fiscal agent. And in doing that, it's clear to me that there's some ambiguity in places where it probably there shouldn't be. So the terms could be more specifically addressed. And I would also share that in speaking with some of my colleagues over at the city attorney's office, they don't speak for the city, but just from a legal perspective, they are in agreement that this is not a bad time to go back and look at this agreement again.
This agreement was originally written in 1985 and it has not been revisited since.
No, the current agreement was signed in 2014. And it's been renewed automatically.
Original was 1985.
Yeah, but this was last reviewed in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's still 8 years, so.
So with that, Mr. Chair, unless there are some questions.
Okay, yeah, the executive committee does recommend that we send this notice to the city to just open these negotiations and relook at this agreement. As has been stated, there have been a few things that have come up, and we may need to modernize the agreement. So this is just the notice. It doesn't include any recommendation as to what changes should be made.
I move that we give notice to the city that the MPO intends to review and potentially make changes to the operational agreement.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion carried.
So, Mr. Chair, now we move into executive session and
Okay. I think I can do this. Now we're going to move into executive session under Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code for item Section 551-074 personnel matters. I will need a motion to enter into executive session.
Motion to go into executive
Is there a
session.
second? Second. Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now enter into an executive session as soon as we have the room clear.
so as a matter of, only policy board members can remain in the room, so all of us, including myself, will have to leave. So please, if you can move.
We get to keep our attorney.
Yeah.
Big enough to resign then?
Yeah. so tight you can't even talk.
Just a notice to the TPB members appearing remotely, Marisol has sent a link for you to access the executive session. So keep an eye out for that. And also please, for those of you participating remotely, there was a reminder sent out earlier today about the requirements for you to follow in order to participate remotely. Mainly, you need to be visible and the audio needs to be on at all times. Thank you.
Me neither, but.
No. Ujú. Ujú. Pero voy a volver, no me voy todo el día. And I guess
It's now 11 o'clock, and I will entertain a motion to reconvene the open session of the TPB. I have a motion, is there a second? Discussion, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries, we are now reconvened. We have item number 6 regarding the Executive Director's Employment Agreement. Do I have a motion regarding item B, approve the Executive Director's Employment Agreement?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move to approve the employment agreement between the El Paso MPO and the Executive Director, Eduardo Calvo, dated to be effective on April 1st, 2022, and that the El Paso MPO Chair be authorized to execute the employment agreement on behalf of the El Paso MPO, and that the MPO Chair may take all other necessary actions in accordance with the directives provided by the TPB to include a 2-year term with 2 one-year annual extension options and a 4% pay increase.
Second.
Can I get you to amend your motion to also include the minor adjustments to content that we talked about? Or do we need to do that?
A minor adjustments to.
Well, you said we based this on the old agreement. Do we need to?
No, sir, that's.
We do not have to progress those. Okay, all right, very good. So that is the motion. I have a second. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Calvo.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We can go on to item number 7, reports
right.
and discussion.
So we're moving now to reports and discussion. Number 7, status on the 30-day public involvement comment period for the Regional Mobility Strategy, RMS 2050, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, MTP, RMS 2023-2026, Transportation Improvement Program, TIP, and Transportation Conformity Report. Before that, we have a lot of people signed up for public comment here. Before we open it, let me just give you a little bit of background where we are. So we have the documents right now available for public review. We're in the middle of the 30-day comment period that ends on next Tuesday, I believe. It's February I believe it's the 22nd. So the intent is to, once we close the public comment period, MPO staff will take every single comment that we received and we will answer them, answer questions or provide responses to the comments. And once we do that, then the next step is to bring it to TPAC and then to the policy board for adoption of the documents. Once the board adopts the documents, then we submit the documents for approval. And actually, it's a conformity report that the Federal Highway Administration and the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, actually approve. But they've got to see the whole package. And like I said before, that process we do not control. I mean, this is something that Federal Highway, EPA, some of the state agencies like TCEQ, TxDOT, in both Texas and New Mexico, they get together, they review. Could be a lengthy process. We know that it's taken a while, and that's why we feel that we've always felt very strongly. And when we started this process almost 2 years ago, we developed a schedule to leave ample time for this review of the conformity documentation. Because again, we don't know how long the feds and the partners are gonna take. So with that, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, we can open it for
public comment.
Oh. All right, well.
Alisa Garza?
Do we have Alisa Garza on the Teams?
Alisa Garza. On the list.
Okay. Well, we'll go back. We also received, Mr. Chair, several comments or in writing that they are requesting that we read these comments. They're not participating,
Maybe
so
we
I think
can
it's okay.
Say
So
those for the end, and then let's go through the list, and then we'll, okay?
as you wish.
Peggy Hinkle? Peggy, I saw,
I'm here. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Peggy. I'm just going to read because I'm really nervous, okay? My name is Peggy Hinkle. I grew up in El Paso. I left in 1973 when I graduated from Burgess. I moved back in January of 2017. For 35 of those years, I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. I saw firsthand the lie that advocates of freeways and wider freeways always tell us more lanes will reduce traffic. That never happens, and that is true all over this state and all over the country. More lanes equals more traffic equals more pollution. When I was a child, my father lived in Los Angeles. Even that long ago, a long time ago, the LA freeways were already parking lots, and that continues. This proposal to widen I-10 between Copia and Executive is a terrible plan, as the independent analyst hired by the county commissioners found. We share the air with Juarez. There is no way around it. It is incumbent on us to do everything we can on our side to reduce emissions and pollution here in the El Paso area. Many of our residents already suffer poor health due to pollution. The American Lung Association says that El Paso is 13th in ozone pollution. They term this a sunburn for the lungs. Study after study has shown poor health outcomes for those who live near freeways, including asthma, strokes, heart attacks, etc. USC in Los Angeles has published many of these studies. We are also a medically underserved community. I am certain that many of you have at least one of these health problems, and if not you, someone in your family does. We must prioritize public transportation and push TCEQ to push for lower emissions versus their ridiculous statement that there is no point to reduce emissions because we have no control over Juarez. Wider freeways only push induced demand. More cars on the road is the result. We can instead push induced demand for public transportation. If we offer more bus service, especially express buses, at the times that residents need service, they will start to ride the bus and also to depend on it. If filled, each bus could potentially remove up to 50 cars from the roads. My husband rode the bus across the Bay Bridge every workday for 30 years. Google, Facebook, Apple, and other corporations offer wired buses all over the Bay so that employees can work as they commute. I don't know if we need that in El Paso, but it is something that exists elsewhere. This committee, MPO, I believe it is your responsibility to release the data that the independent analyst needs. Evidently, there is no rule or law or regulation that data cannot be released. And I believe it is also your responsibility to consider the
Ms. Hinkle, your 3 minutes are up, ma'am. Thank you so much.
more concrete equals more heat and more pollution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is either Angel or Angel Duova.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the name?
Ulloa.
Angel Ulloa.
Ulloa.
Angel Ulloa?
Okay, we can go to Kenneth Bell.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, let me know when the clock starts.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So first of all, thank you all for holding this MPO meeting, open public comment. I just want to say that I think it's a mistake to support this I-10 widening project. Yesterday at the Commissioner's Court, Mr. Norm Marshall, the independent consultant, gave a great presentation and report, basically stated that this I-10 widening project is neither feasible nor is it responsible. It does not address issues of congestion, or even where congestion is most likely to occur. It's going to be on the west side near the mountain or east side, but this project is focused in the central area where there's not as the congestion doesn't exist. And TxDOT's information is based on an outdated algorithm, outdated system, the 2045 model, when we have a new 2050 model that's updated. But also historically, there's no proof to show that highway widening even works. You know, for example, Katy Highway in Houston has 26 lanes, and since they built it 10 years ago, commute times have increased by 30%. So now it takes even longer for people to get from point A to point B, even though there's more lanes. There's no proof that widening freeways has ever significantly reduced commute times for anyone. Not only that, it's just you're basically just shepherding us to use the highways, which is again going to cause more CO2 emissions, more environmental damage to our city when we're already in a non-feasible state because of the air pollution. This is just contributing to air pollution. It does, from an environmental standpoint, it's absolutely terrible, regardless of, you know, people claiming that this deck park is going to be a green space. Yeah, the pretend grass is going to be colored green, but that doesn't make it environmentally friendly. Not to mention the price tag, which y'all still have not figured out how you're going to pay for this, because TxDOT is basically putting it on us. Let's keep it real. And I want to thank Commissioner Holguin for voting against this I-10 widening project consistently, and I hope the rest of you will follow her lead on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Next we have Veronica Carrillo. Veronica Carrillo. Carrillo?
I believe she's one of the ones that sent the
The statement? Okay. And maybe Kathy Anderson also, it has a star. Kathy Anderson?
Also one of the.
Also? Mr. Storch, Robert Storch?
Thank you. Good morning, or almost afternoon. My name's Bob Storch. I live in Sunset Heights. Last year, the El Paso County Commissioners Court hired a traffic consultant to provide an independent analysis of the Downtown 10 highway widening project. Yesterday, they received that draft report. The report from Smart Mobility questions the veracity of the TxDOT traffic study. It also raised a question of the MPO's transparently. Apparently, the MPO refused to provide the county's consultant with available 2050 traffic modeling data. This is not top secret security data. It's data that is not, it's not data that's incomplete. It is data gathered by public entities to prepare public documents about a public project. Public documents you are asking the public to comment on right now. Commissioners Court requested this independent review of a major public works project to provide themselves and the public with more information. The MPO's refusal to provide information to a professional to enlighten the public indicates a lack of cooperation I find disturbing. The MPO staff spent 2.5 years developing the draft MPP, TIP, and transportation conformity reports. Reports totaling hundreds of pages of technical detail. With little explanation and even less public awareness, you provided a minimal 30-day comment period. It further came to light at yesterday's commissioners meeting that TxDOT was not forthcoming with information to the county's consultant. Necessary data from TxDOT had to be obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. Commissioners Court is asking the MPO to extend current public comment period and release the 2015 traffic modeling data to their independent consultant, I'm asking the same request. The failure of the MPO to provide the data makes it look like you all have something to hide. The minimal 30-day public comment period with little rollout makes it look like you really don't want to hear from the public. If you seriously want to engage the public on these major projects that are going to affect us for the next 50 years, you need to provide this data and extend the period. Thank you.
Mr. Storch? I believe Mr. Marcus's is written. Mr. Marcus's is written, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is Mr. Geneva.
Yes.
Mr. White? Scott White?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, members of the chairman, members of the MPO. I know you're going to hear various things about the I-10 widening or this or that. I want to talk about one of the bigger issues I see in these documents in the MTP, the TIP, and the conformity report. And that is, I don't see or cannot find, or perhaps I'm just not reading it properly, but I don't see real definable, measurable goals to work towards that help us say what our vision, what our policies, what our projects should be working towards in terms of what kind of transportation system do we need to meet the needs of this region and this community going forward into the future. We have references to transit, to multimodal options, to better air quality, to all these different things, but how do we get there? As we look forward, we need that kind of vision to help us identify what the priorities need to be, so that in the MTP, that is clearly laid out. In the TIP, we can then look at the various projects that are listed there and be able to say how they do or do not help us meet those long-term goals, those priorities. I think I've said it many times before, but we need to set policies, and you as the policy board should be setting those policies and those visions and say, this is the future we envision for El Paso, so that we, the public, can then say, yes, this is the future we want, or no, this is not the future of transportation we want. And Mr. Calvo, I've been thinking about something you've been saying several times in the past couple of weeks about how the MPO cannot affect land use planning. But it strikes me that there in the room before you are a lot of people who can. And this is why we need that vision and those goals, so that we can align transportation and land use planning, and so that they all work towards that long-term common goal. And I think as long as that is not a part of these planning documents, we need to stop and take a step back and figure out how we can include that kind of vision, those kind of goals, things that are demonstrably measurable as we move forward and work towards these goals.
Thank you, Mr. White. Your time's up, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Okay, Mr. Caldwell, are you going to read these statements in, or would you like me to do that, or?
I can do that. I mean, we have them here in an email on my phone.
Very good.
So let me start with Kathy Anderson. So it goes, let's stop wasting money on these mega highway projects and start investing in making it easier for people to get around our community. Let's make it easier to walk, bike, and take the bus. Most trips are short trips, but the message our transportation planning system keeps sharing is you need to get there fast, so drive, and drive on the freeway. I find that from the Upper Valley, I can get anywhere in the city in 30 minutes using surface streets. Most of them need repairs, though. Let's reroute the trucks through the Anthony Gap. Thank you, Kathy Anderson.
Thank you. Next one.
The next one is from Mr. Richard Genera.
Mr. Calvo, you want to speak into the microphone?
Hello, members of the MPO. My name is Richard Genera. I'm a lifetime El Paso and have worked downtown for just over 8 years. As a taxpayer and employee in the downtown area, I find the proposed downtown I-10 expansion to be, at best, a misguided and misinformed attempt to solve a non-existing issue, and at worst, a racist and demeaning attempt to squeeze the people of El Paso. This I-10 displacement, and it is a displacement, serves to do nothing but increase profits for developers and displace home and business owners, predominantly BIPOC residents. We deserve better than this. The proposed additional lanes are not needed. I drive to and from downtown 5, even 6 days a week. Is there traffic sometimes? Sure. Would I trade the lives and livelihood of my fellow El Pasans to save 5 minutes of travel time? Absolutely not. With a half-chewed carrot being dangled before us, this deck park sweetened the deal. I find this proposed trade-off to be pathetic and frankly insulting. And TxDOT expect us to foot the bill for this project on their behalf. Tell me they don't respect the people of El Paso without telling me they don't respect the people of El Paso. There have been countless studies that prove induced demand is the only real result to be had from this venture. A mere few months after completion, the lanes will return to a pace that TxDOT will deem unacceptable, except there will be more cars, causing more pollution, doing more damage to those around the area, and then what? We spend more money and displace more of our people. I will not have this. The city of El Paso will not have this. I urge you, members of the MPO, to vote against approving this project. It is not in the best interest of El Paso. There is no return on investment for the people of El Paso. I hope you will make the choice for the good of the people of El Paso. Thank you. Respectfully, Richard Genera.
Thank you.
All right. The next one is from Veronica Carrillo. Okay, good morning. I'd like to submit the following comment to be read during today's meeting, please. I am deeply concerned with the proposed Downtown 10 project. My list of concerns are long, but I'll highlight just a few. Adding more lanes has shown not being effective in alleviating congestion. No matter how wide we make I-10, adding capacity only encourages more driving and discourages people from walking, cycling, or using transit. The MPO didn't do any outreach. The plan documents are combined 350 plus pages long and available only in English in a community where, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 70% of residents speak a language other than English at home. Please extend the public comment period and pivot away from widening I-10 to alternative solutions that will result in connectivity through the use of walking, bicycling, and using other transit. Veronica Carrillo. Am I missing anybody, Marisol?
Mr. Marcus, do you have one from Mr. Marcus? Yes.
Okay. This says, dear board members, serious consideration should be given to the traffic consultant report and preliminary recommendations for alternatives to the expansion and frontage roads proposal for Downtown 10. We can't build our way out of congestion, no matter how many times we try or how wide we make the freeway. Adding capacity only encourages more people to drive, and it discourages people from walking, cycling, or using transit. Additionally, please get rid of the circular access roads and maintain our street grid. As residents and business owners near Sunset Heights, we need a pedestrian and bike-friendly path into and out of downtown. The MPO's own visioning exercise showed us that the public wants safer streets, better transit, and a more walkable community. But the MPO's own project list show the majority of funding is for new or wider roads, almost exclusively for cars. Thank you for your consideration. Peace, Al Marcus, and Patricia Medici.
That's the only comments we have on this item. Okay. Open it for discussion from the board. Is there any comment?
Sir, Mr. Miller, I believe that Angel Yola was back on the line.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Yes, I'm here. Thank you for taking my comment. I just want to reiterate what most people have already said. The public is now being informed about what is going on, and we're upset, angry, and a little let down because we spent so much money on a study that proved what we were already saying. So at this point, we just want to know why there was a public comment opportunity when we're not being heard. Essentially, it just seems performative, but most of us have been on these meetings for months and some even years asking not to go forward with this. And I hope after today the MPO sees the way the people of El Paso feel about this project and take all of our comments into consideration going forward. All we ask for is better public transportation, safer sidewalks, and safer bike lanes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe that's all. Is that correct? Okay. We have finished the public comment portion. We can go to discussion. Is there discussion regarding this, or can we move on?
If I may, Mr. Chair, so the request to extend the public comment period, we've heard that from several folks. Again, I think we need to balance, the extending the period versus the following the schedule that we have shown, to the public and to everybody for the last few months. So, we're thinking, to us, the critical date is the March Policy Board meeting, which is at the end of the month. So we're thinking that perhaps extending the public comment period for a couple of weeks would, help. I know that some people are going to say that it's not going to be enough, and, what is enough, right? But I think if we extend it for a couple of weeks, that would also give, more people the opportunity to continue providing comments.
Can you do that administratively?
Yeah, I don't think we need action for that. As long as we follow all of the rules and procedures from our public participation plan, which, I think we are, and, we feel good about that. I think we can extend that. The only caveat is that when we present this document to TPAC, we will still be technically in the open comment period, but I'm thinking that we can, by the time that TPAC happens, we'll have every comment that we received by then answered, and perhaps, TPAC can make a conditional, recommendation if that's what TPAC chooses to do.
I think that's appropriate. Okay, we can move on. Item number 8.
All right, item number 8 is New Mexico DOT Transportation Project Fund fiscal year 2023 call for projects.
Hello, good morning. Gabriela Lopez with the El Paso MPO. This item is to announce that we are now opening a call for projects for the New Mexico Department of Transportation, who is soliciting applications for their Transportation Project Fund for fiscal year 2023. Included in the backup documentation of the agenda is the announcement and timeline for the project call. The call for projects, as I mentioned, is open today, and the first deadline is on March 18th at 12 p.m. noon. That's when the draft applications are due to the El Paso MPO by electronic format. All application documents and information is uploaded already to our website and will be available for anyone interested. The information includes all eligible projects, the project prioritization criteria, and the documents that are being requested as part of the application to be submitted. Just as a reminder, this is only for the New Mexico portion of the El Paso MPO region, And if you have any questions, the point of contact for the project call will be Tim McDaniel with the El Paso MPO and myself, Gabriela Lopez.
Thank you, ma'am. Any comment from the board? Thank you very much. We can move on to item number 10. Sorry, I missed it. Nine, I'm sorry, number 9.
All right, item number 9, statewide TxDOT Safety Task Force. Just a quick report. I don't recall if I mentioned this to you, but this is a task force that started late last year. It's spearheaded by Texas Transportation Commissioner Laura Ryan. She's always been a very vocal advocate for safety on the TxDOT highways and in every highway for that matter. So a task force was created by the commission, having Laura Ryan and also Commissioner Alvin New as co-chairs. They invited a group of MPOs and a group of TxDOT folks from all parts of the state. And they are, asking us to really put our thinking hats on, looking at the level of incidents and fatalities, especially that we're having right now on Texas highways, and really try to figure out a way, thinking outside of the box in terms of what we can do. So we've been working on this at the state level, but one of the initiatives that I think is important to do here locally, and again, I spoke to the chair about this, is do a similar committee here at the local level where we, first of all, identify the key people that need to be on the table and really, address the issue. Because right now, the trend is unfortunately going in the wrong direction. Any way you look at it, we have more serious incidents and fatalities, unfortunately. The last couple of weeks have been terrible, quite frankly. The type of incidents that we've had leading to fatalities. So the focus here really is looking at 3 basic elements when we talk about safety. They call it the 3 E's. Some people say it's 4 or 5, but it's basically engineering. So there's a lot of things that we can do from a technical side, from a geometric design, safety features that we can add to highways. A second thing is education, right? We can engineer, we can do a lot of things, but if we don't educate people on the use of seat belts, on the use of helmets for motorcyclists or cyclists for that matter, for pedestrians, crossing at crosswalks, and it's the education element is tremendously important. And the third one is enforcement, right? Enforcement obviously plays a very important role. I think all of us do the same thing, right? If you're driving a little bit fast on a facility and you see a law enforcement vehicle ahead of you, what do? Well, you slow down, right? So enforcement is not the only solution, obviously, but I think it plays a very important role. So this committee that I'm suggesting and talking to the chair needs to bring everybody together, and it's not just within the city limits. It's all the communities, right? So it's clearly the city of El Paso and other municipalities that have your own law enforcement capabilities. Of course, the county sheriff's office, and other interest groups. I think Mr. Scott White, for example, being a great advocate for bicycle and pedestrian modes. He also wants to be part of it, and we need input from that from those groups as well. So it's up to you, Mr. Chair. I think you and I spoke about the possibility of perhaps creating an ad hoc committee.
I think first we should listen to Mr. White has signed up to speak on as public comment. Mr. White.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members. The reason I signed up to speak on this issue is because in 2019, the Texas Transportation Commission adopted the Road to Zero goal.
Mr. White, can I interrupt you just a second?
Yes, sir.
Members, we have now lost quorum, so we cannot have discussion. We can continue to listen to presentations, but we cannot have discussion. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Mr. White, please continue.
Okay. In 2019, the Texas Transportation Commission adopted their Road to Zero goal to reduce and end serious and fatal traffic crashes, cutting them in half by 2035 and ending them by 2050. So there would be zero. As I mentioned earlier, this means setting a goal and defining metrics, and that is why a group like this is so important, so that we can consider all the options, not just what are considered the best options by the experts, but options brought to us from the people who have actually suffered as a result of traffic violence. We need their lived experience, their understanding. Why is it that they crossed at a certain point? Why is it the driver did not slow down? We need to understand these behaviors if we are going to modify them, so that we can look at our system and not make the system perfect, but make the system survivable, because we do know people make human error. And going forward, we need to factor that in, that we do need these goals. We do need a better understanding of what makes the system safer. And we can talk about enforcement, but we can talk about self-enforcing design. We can talk about educating pedestrians and cyclists and whatnot, but we also need to make sure drivers understand, because there is a belief out there amongst many of them that the speed limit is the speed you must drive, not that you should be driving to the conditions. And there is even a bit in the existing Texas Transportation Code, section 552.008, that says even if a person is not crossing in a crosswalk, it is still the responsibility of the motorist to exercise all due care not to hit them. These things add up to a lot of different responses and a lot of different needs, but we have to figure out how to make our system safer for everyone. And that is why I have expressed an interest in serving on this committee, to bring these other views and these other perspectives, and hopefully make our system stronger and better for it. I hope once quorum is re-achieved, this committee could be put forward and empowered. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. White. Oh, we're still short quorum. I think I can make the statement that I could do.
Yes. If the executive director has a report to go with this, he can proceed with that, even though we don't.
I may ask for the indulgence to come back to this item if we regain quorum. So, Mr. Carlo, can you continue with item number 10, please?
Okay. Item number 10 is the RMS 2020 project status report. This is again the monthly report. I do want to highlight two projects that I think are exciting. The first one has to do with the county's rural transit service or system. The LGC, the local government corporation that was created to facilitate the service or to operate the service, had the first meeting a couple days ago. So I think it's a great time. It's a great moment. The fact that the policy board of this policy board supported that project, providing some of the startup funding for 3 years. So it's a great time. Just wanted to, I think we have quorum back, right? I wanted to give the judge or commissioner or Olguin, since you guys are in representing the county, or even the members of the LGC, which are at this point Horizon City, Village of Vinton, and San Elizario. If you guys want to say something, but.
Anybody want to speak to that? Judge? To the transit system? It's a good thing.
It's a great thing, right? And again, as an MPO, we were continue coordinating or try to coordinate public transportation services with the rural transit and the county's rural transit service, along with Sun Metro, and on the New Mexico side with South Central Regional Transit District as well. So just wanted to highlight that.
I can speak for our community in particular. We are presently designing major development around public transportation. So this is really very important to us and some of the outlying communities.
Any chance that Jose could speak to the item? Redonderos, or has to be the?
You have 3 minutes.
We could ask him to.
You can ask him to, exactly. If you usually he hasn't signed up, it's 3 minutes. But if you believe he is, someone that can contribute to the conversation or the discussion in a professional, expert manner, he's.
We've worked.
But he snuck off, so he's not present. I'm sorry.
Sure we could, I guess.
We could ask him to,
When he comes back.
when he comes back, perhaps so. But, okay.
So we've worked really hard on this project. It's extremely important. Connectivity and accessibility has always been the lane for the county. Make sure that no one is limited by transportation. And so I just wanted him to comment more specifically on some of the items, but we'll see when he comes back.
Okay.
Mr. Cabo, while we're waiting, and perhaps Mr. Landeros will come back with. If legal doesn't catch me, I'm going to quickly go back to item number 9 about the task force. We do have quorum now, and we will appoint that task force. What I wanted to speak to this board about is we're going to need help with your suggestions about who would be the best members to be on that. I don't want this to be just an arbitrary selection, but please, we will be reaching out to you, and please reach back out to us for folks that you would think would be, of course, law enforcement's present, but there will be others in the community that should be on that committee. So please be aware of that, and I hope to have that committee appointed by next meeting anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing, Mr. Chair, from my perspective, if we want to do this right, we also need some resources here. So one of the ideas that we have is to maybe bring somebody like TTI to help us with, manage the not just manage, but also do a lot of the research. They're very involved also at the state level. So I think if we have help for this local committee, I think it would be very helpful. So I already started discussions about a potential scope of work and fee with TTI, the local office, and we will bring that along as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would like to say that, the city, if you want to, we can meet up, Eduardo, talk about how we can amplify what we're doing at the city. We already have a quarterly fatality task force that we meet with TxDOT, PD, traffic engineers to look at fatalities across the city and understand what can be done from engineering, like you said, from a PR. We're also in the process of negotiating our Vision Zero program initiative with a consultant that will be taking to council that really talks about the PR campaigns and a lot of what we've done already from a PR collateral standpoint, but share with this task force and really not necessarily duplicate the efforts, but figure out how we can really merge in those efforts in a way that will help the city and everybody else in the region.
Exactly right. So that you're completely in agreement with that. We don't want to duplicate or reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, given that we're participating in this statewide committee, bring also ideas that may be working in other areas as well. It's important. I mean, we have these goals, the road to zero in 2050, 0 fatalities, but in the meantime, while we get there, when you think about it philosophically, that's something that is, truly unacceptable. And especially when we see the trends going in the wrong direction, we've got to do something about that. So we really want to get it right, do it right, certainly not duplicate, but do something meaningful that actually helps.
Mr. Landero.
Can I just make a comment? So we do have a traffic safety specialist, Monica O'Kane, who has a strong coalition group, and a number of her members are first responders. Several different law enforcement agencies are involved in the Strong Coalition Group. So they've got a really good network going when it comes to safety and education and reaching the public on just drug driver, child safety, seatbelt safety, and they've got a really good program. They meet monthly, and they have a good website networking going on. So I'd be nice if you could include them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Further comment? See, Mr. Landeros is back. He doesn't know he's up.
He's always ready, always.
Thank you, Mr. Landeros. Are you aware of what we're asking you to?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Good morning, members of the board. Jose Landeros with El Paso County. We successfully held our first meeting of the local government corporation this past Wednesday, a 5-year process to actually get us here. That agency will act as a venue for us to move forward with expanding regional transit operations, ultimately enhancing connectivity between the county's transit system and the city of El Paso Sun Metro system moving forward. So we have partners right now from the city of Horizon, city of San Elizario, village of Vinton, along with the county. We are looking to re-engage with the cities of Socorro, town of Anthony, and the town of Clint to determine how we can incorporate them into the LGC, make sure that they're, pardon the pun, on board with our process and our project. But we expect great things from this, and we're very lucky to have Mr. Calvo and some of his staff from the MPO attend the meeting, along with our partners at TxDOT and Sun Metro. So we are just getting started, trying to make sure that we have all of the administrative and operational support in place for the LGC, to include things like legal, a fiscal agent, an administrative agent, marketing, creating a specific brand and identity for the LGC. But we expect to have significant, start to ramp up operations by late summer, early fall. We are actually going to begin implementing some additional routes at the end of March, beginning of April, using that soft launch as a pilot for future route expansion. Primarily this route, Route 31, will now serve the East Lake Mission Ridge corridor, which is an area of the county that currently is boomed in development since the past, over the past 10 years, but actually has no access to public transit at this time. And, that's just the starting point. The LGC is charged with implementing a number of findings that were outlined in the report that the county commissioned the Texas A&M Transportation Institute to develop a few years ago, that will ultimately include additions of on-demand service similar to the Sun Metro's paratransit service, in addition to also offering flexible routes where individuals that live within the 3/4 of a mile off of the actual transit path will have the opportunity to request that the bus deviate off the path and pick them up at home. So this helps to solve that first mile, last mile issue that a lot of transit riders end up having, where they are close, they want to ride the bus, but they actually can't access it. And so that'll help serve a new population, and we hope continue to see ridership increase. I'm happy to report that, all transit agencies took a hit in ridership going back because of the pandemic. Our numbers are not where they were before the pandemic, but we have steadily increased ridership, and we continue to see that ridership steadily tick up every month. And as vaccines continue to roll out and we enter a new phase of this pandemic, we hope to continue to not only hit our pre-pandemic service levels, but go well beyond that with new service lines. So I'm available to take any questions that the board may have, but we are very appreciative of the MPO for the CMAQ Startup Operating Assistance that is going to be transformative to ensuring that we can make these strategic investments in public transit in the outer service area.
Thank you, Mr. Landeros. Any questions for Mr. Landeros? Thank you very much for.
Thank you. And I apologize for not being in the room, but thank you for the opportunity to address the board.
With the board's indulgence, and in the interest of time, I think we can jump to item number 12, the executive director's report, with your indulgence. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, we'll bring item 11 next month. All right, so the executive director report. The first thing I want to highlight is a press release that came out yesterday from the Congresswoman's office announcing $600 million for the modernization and expansion of the Bridge of the Americas land port of entry. So, you know, we've had some very, very preliminary discussions with General Services Administration, GSA, who's going to be managing the project. They're still waiting to get the approval of their funding plan. So it's not 100% a done deal yet, but it's a matter of days. I mean, I was actually surprised, happily surprised to see $600 million for the improvement of the Bridge of the Americas. I don't know the details. The press release talks about a feasibility study that I'm aware exists, but I haven't seen the details and all that. But we certainly will work with GSA to make sure that all the stakeholders are involved in the development process. My understanding is that they themselves have to do a NEPA document. So they need to develop alternatives. Of course, get a lot of public comment and involvement from the public and stakeholders as well. So, but I think the news itself is super exciting. So we'll see what's next, and we'll certainly bring back the report here to the MPO Policy Board. We already talked about BTAC. We have this meeting next week, so we'll report anything resulting from that. And one final thing, this is more procedural here. Every year, as you know, we need to send to you all, and you all need to fill out a financial disclosure form that we'll be sending that out shortly. If nothing has changed in your situation, just check the box that says nothing has changed, and just send it back. But it's one of the things that we need to do every year.
Just a point of clarification for the members of the state delegation, we file our reports to the Texas Ethics Commission. Does that suffice?
I think so. When you receive the, just check the box saying that, you already did that, so you don't have to. That's all I have.
We have that. Okay. Well, we can stay for another hour if you want to.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? We are adjourned.
You want these back?
Yes.
Yep.
Please leave the evaluations on your desk.
Remember, we used to get done by 9:30.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm seeing it, I think.
Good to see you. Yeah, we were down by 9:30 or 10.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Well, so we don't have training now, so we can start at 9 again. It's over with.
We're nearing that corner.
Have a nice weekend.
This was one, obviously.
Oh, yes, that one, come, yes. Good. See you.